Hub,
and Spoke. Audio Collective.
You smell that? That's right. Mountain Gazette 201 is fresh off the press. It's being packaged right now as you listen to this. For real, it's actually being packaged. And if you go to mountaingazette.com/subscribe, you have until April 29th to subscribe and get 201. After that, there's no telling if you're going to get this or not. So you better head over there now. I do love the smell of print. Now, folks, kick back, relax, sip that coffee, and enjoy the show.
The latest release from Commercial Type, Ionic Modern, is the perfect typeface for editorial projects in print and on screen. Available to see and test at commercialtype.com.
Here in the Green Mountains of Vermont, we print magazines. We're Lane Press, and we've been doing this since 1904. We don't print books, journals, or signs, just magazines. All of our equipment is made for that, and all of our craftspeople specialize in it. We print for prestigious colleges and universities, for business-to-business brands. We print regional, association, niche, and newsstand titles, and we would love to print your magazine. To learn more, visit us at lanepress.com.
It's not church and state. Between editorial and sales, editorial is God and everything else is sales. I credit Highsnob. Look, they were first. They're really great at it. The curation is amazing in the shop. It's not your typical e-commerce site. But yes, I think the diverse revenue stream is part of what gives me the freedom to be a true editor in the sense of really writing stories that are true.
This is Print is Dead, Long Live Print, a podcast about magazines and the people who made and make them. I'm Deborah Bishop.
I'm Rachel Baker. I'm Maggie Bullock.
I'm Patrick Mitchell.
In early April, what's left of the magazine industry gathered at Terminal 5 to see who would win this year's National Magazine Awards, the ASMEs. Throughout the evening, the usual suspects stepped up to accept their Alexander Calder brass elephants, the Ellies, on behalf of their teams at The Atlantic, New York Mag, the New York Times Magazine. Then came the Award for General Excellence, Service and Lifestyle, a category that covers every food, fashion, and fitness magazine in the business.
And the Ellie went to?
Content juggernaut Highsnobiety, a sneaker blog turned cool kid media amalgam that encompasses a twice annual $20 per issue print magazine, plus a flood of social media, a website that is also an e-commerce platform, and a creative agency that does 360-degree marketing and storytelling for brands.
Before the crowd could start scratching their graying heads, a Billie Eilish lookalike in a gray Thom Brown skirt-and-pant suit took to the dais. There were plenty of people in that room who had never given Highsnobiety much, if any, thought. But in that moment, this woman, Willa Bennett, Highsnobiety's 30-year-old editor-in-chief, had officially become a force to be reckoned with. Not only that, but Highsnobiety's business model, which bends rules that had long been sacrosanct in magazine journalism, suddenly appeared to have won the seal of approval from the oldest of the old guard.
The post at Highsnobiety was a major leap for Willa. Just 2 years ago, she was the social media manager at GQ. Our friends who worked there with her tell us they thought of her as the industry's little sister, hungry, passionate, and looking to translate the magic of magazines to a new generation. They said that even though she's disrupting the magazine as we once knew it, at heart, Bennett is a magazine junkie who really venerates old ways.
And now, the surprise win has put her in the spotlight of the establishment media, with the New York Times Styles running a portrait of Bennett in her signature suit and tie look on its cover. The win also inspired a segment on the Slate Culture Gabfest, in which the host pondered, what is a magazine now? And over in Spreadlandia, we thought, why not turn that question directly to Willa Bennett herself? In the end, this conversation left us feeling more optimistic than usual about the future of media. It also made us feel old as shit. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
Willa, thanks so much for being here. We're so glad you're here today. We're especially excited because last month your magazine, Highsnobiety, won the National Magazine Award for General Excellence, which is a huge deal. Can you describe ASME night for us? We're both ASME geeks, and we weren't in the room, but we had some spies texting us throughout. Describe it from your perspective, your big night.
Thank you for having me. I love the pod. I love the conversations you guys have. So excited to be here. Yeah, ASMEs were really surreal, to be honest. I had never been before. Been nominated a couple of times, but I've never made it in that room. And it was pretty wild to look around and just see so many people, like my old bosses, old people who had edited me, people I'd crossed paths with, people I just admired online, and to be sitting there really felt so special. It was one of those moments in my career where I honestly was like, wow, I'm in this room. It was really cool. It's funny, like the vibe inside, people were like, oh, this is a Terminal 5. And I was like, no, this is so special. It still, to me, felt so surreal. And yeah, I was truly not expecting at all to it, especially General Excellence. I thought maybe our visuals would have potentially won something. I saw a path that way. I thought maybe like our social media platforms, but General Excellence really has always felt so unattainable. I was really surprised.
Who were you starstruck by in the room? That feeling of being in the ASMEs if you're a magazine geek is so much fun. And I feel like it's like the biggest celebrities if you're into that kind of thing. Who are you excited to see?
There were a couple different young writers. Honestly, the 30 under 30 journalist, there's a visuals editor at New York Mag I thought was really cool to meet. I mean, obviously Anna was there, gave her a hug. But David Haskell, Will Welsh, Lindsay Peoples, they were the ones that were really there for me when I was coming up in this industry. And so to be sitting alongside those three specifically, it felt really meaningful. But the General Excellence Award was right after the 30 under 30 ASME Next, it's called. And I found that really cool. I was cheering for them so loudly. I felt just like they're the future of this. I hope they're all winning the General Excellence in the next couple of years.
So you name-checked some of those people. Our spies, as we said, who were in the room, were touched when you got up because you were the young disruptor. But when you got up, we were told that you acknowledged some of your predecessors and gave it up for the oldsters in the room. But what did you want to say? And who did you give that tribute to?
And how did you plan it? Did you practice?
It was pretty much like the night before the BR team at Highsnob was like, hey, you should prepare something because if you win, you're going to walk up. And I responded via text. Literally, I said, LOL. And then when I couldn't sleep, I was like, all right, I just got to be prepared. I'm so unexpected to win and I'm so unexpected even to be in that room. Let me just jot down some notes. And what I wrote was, everyone in this room, your job matters. We need journalism and print matters. We need to inspire young journalists to still want to dream of this was basically the gist of it. And why I said that was, and I've said this in a couple of panels before, I really do feel this responsibility to make young people so excited about journalism. And I feel like every time I go to a school, I just spoke at FIT, I do like an NYU seminar every once in a while, and everyone is feeling so disillusioned by what's possible. And I feel as a young person in the room, as this like unexpected winner of the ASMEs, but even a nomination, honestly, it was the first time I've ever been nominated. I feel this responsibility to young people and I feel very close to young people. But the reason I thanked those specific people is they just stood out as people throughout my career that had really like given me space to have my own voice. Lindsay Peoples really was like crucial in publishing my first piece for Teen Vogue. Welsh, obviously, I learned so much from him and he was my most recent boss. And I still feel like a lot of my leadership skills came from him. And then David Haskell, we've just gotten coffee in different points of my career. And I felt like he's really inspired me on what an EIC can be, what reporting is. And yeah, I think there's a lot I can learn from him and I have learned from him.
So that night, the New Yorker got completely stiffed. Yeah. Vogue always gets stiffed at the ASMEs. So it was big news that you won in general, but also the contrast of that was big news. And I think some people were really shook that Highsnobiety was winning General Excellence. Did you perceive that at the time? What was the energy like around that for you?
I was so shocked. It really is unprecedented what happened. The ASMEs to me, and I've judged before, it really is as old school as it gets. You're really sitting there looking sentence by sentence, photo by photo, and I believe in it so deeply. I study journalism. I really believe in the ASMEs and I see the power in them. And I was honestly really surprised. And I think what it means, to answer the second part of your question, what it means for journalism is I think there is space to innovate. And I think it was really amazing that the judges on that category did select us. I think it was not expected. And I think in a lot of ways, we're not traditional journalism with a capital J.
This would probably be a good moment for you to tell us what it is. And a lot of the people listening to this, because we cannot put it into a one sentence description. So what is it, this whole organism? How do you describe it?
Highsnobiety started off 2005 sneaker blog. Incredible. Our co-founder, who is now my boss, a CEO, he was sitting in his dorm room and really passionate about the emergence of streetwear and fashion. And then I think with previous EICs, it's really evolved into like magazine, closer to fashion, capital F, evolved into thought leadership. And I think my journey here and what my POV comes in is I've really pushed it into a youth culture platform. So it is this ecosystem, it is this universe that is very unique to young people, to looking at not what people are wearing, but why they're wearing it, and storytelling from different unique angles.
Can you describe like all of the different tentacles of the beast? There's the print magazine.
Wow, it went from an organism, now it's a beast.
That's all a compliment, by the way.
We're just poets over here at Prentice.
That's cool. I'm a poet too. Yeah, so the different tentacles. Nichelle Sanders said it beautifully. She's the GM here. She said that it's not church and state. Between editorial and sales, editorial is God, and everything else is sales. So there's the editorial under me, website, social media platforms. And then we have the agency side, and then we have e-commerce. I credit Highsnob. Look, they were first. I think a lot of people in the pandemic were trying to catch up to what Highsnob had been doing. They're really great at it. The curation is amazing in the shop. It's not your typical e-commerce site. But yes, those three exist cohesively. And I think the diverse revenue stream is part of what gives me the freedom to be a true editor, in the sense of really writing stories that are true.
And so what is your role? Like, do you touch the agency stuff, or do you touch the e-commerce?
It depends on where you're looking at from. No, I am really passionate about brands. So sometimes I'll like tap in if I'm excited about a project. Sometimes I'll just give some opinions on the side, but not in a formal capacity. And it's really like, for me, choose your own adventure. It's not mandatory. It's not something I'm forced to do. I just am really fascinated by brands. And so I think that's the exciting part of having an agency over there. E-commerce, I definitely weigh into some of the storytelling, but they are separate teams. But of course, Highsnobiety is 290 people. That is so many cool creatives. And so I look at it as, wow, we have so many different ways to tell stories that maybe isn't just a magazine. The magazine is just part of it.
So you're talking to us from your office in New York, but there's also like Berlin, am I right? Where are these 290 people? So we're magazine dinosaurs. We live in a world of shrinking staffs. So literally we looked it up on LinkedIn and we were like, what? So where are all these people and how does that piece of it work?
Our biggest office is Berlin. That's where our headquarters are. And then New York is the second biggest. We have London, we have Paris, we have Amsterdam. I have a few editors in LA now. To me, I think if anything, though, the pandemic has taught us different ways of working. We really do hire for the talent. But I do think you can tell in our content, our roots are in Berlin. And that's something that we do not shy away from. I see it as such a luxury. Even Wednesday mornings, we have this meeting called Office Hours where everyone can tell crazy ideas, respond to things happening in the news. And I think it's such a luxury that we have young people calling in from a lot of the big cities where our audience are. But I agree. I come from small editorial legacy background, and I've never been used to having such a big team. And that's something I've really thought about in terms of managing a global team. There are some people that I've only met once or twice. And so how do you keep them inspired? How do you keep them in the know about what your vision is, and how do you actually make change and tell stories when it's just not as easy as like walking into an office?
How do you do that?
The office hours, which has been really helpful. It's like a Wednesday brainstorm that we have every single week. We all Zoom in and we all run through ideas. I think what's also cool about it is I've set up this anonymous Google form where people can also submit ideas. So if they have an idea, but they don't necessarily feel they can share it, I'll just read through the ideas and we discuss them all objectively. Some people are like, I wrote that, this is what I wanted to say. And I'm just like, as long as the ideas are coming out, I think it does help us stay connected as a team. But honestly, I haven't really spoken about this to anyone yet, but I read a lot of parenting books.
What? Incredible. My God. Bring it. Say more. We need to know about this.
I was like, I don't know how that's going to land.
Well, you come to the right place.
Honestly, it's like the most helpful thing with leadership, I think. I've tried to read a lot of like leadership books and haven't really felt them like really effective. A lot of them are just like, listen, take a walk. But parenting books, I feel like, actually teach you how to lead and really execute on something you're trying to get done in a way that has been really helpful for me, especially with just staying connected. And a lot of people, it's their first or second job. And so I do feel like I am setting the stage for their career. And so I feel like having hard conversations in the right way, it is important to model that.
I'm just laughing internally because Rachel has 2 toddlers. So she fully understands the mental jujitsu of managing unwieldy.
Right now I'm taking a nonviolent communication class, which I think a lot about how it would be great for managing a team. Unfortunately, I'm not managing people professionally right now. I just manage my family. But it's a lot of, I observe this. I am feeling this is my request. I think it's like pretty great no matter what the age.
And even like what you just said, this is my request, like really articulating that, like being like, this is a change in strategy, like we're pivoting this. Really being able to articulate that is something parenting books really harp on and really teach you how to listen. And I think that's honestly been helpful in all places of my life.
I think you just dropped something. We'll have to come back to that at some point. Rachel and I will probably meditate on that for a long time. Now this feels like a little bit of a non sequitur, but I feel like now that you've told the listener what this organism is, it gives us more context to just touch on the message of ASME. I think that what happened is it opened up this conversation, again, not for the first time, but what even is a magazine and what is ASME trying to tell us we need to do for survival? I think people were parsing that after the fact, which is an interesting thing to reevaluate. What do you think about that conversation?
I think that we owe it to the industry to just always be open to what a magazine is. I think a lot about book publishing. I'm very passionate about writing and I would love to write books one day. And I haven't written a book, but what I see from afar is they have found a way to sell physical copies of stories in a way that we maybe haven't cracked. And I think that's interesting, like just what Book Talk has done for authors. Like authors are selling more copies than they ever have historically, and ones that aren't published. But with magazines, I think we give so much of it away on social media. Billie Eilish is on her cover. Her fans can see everything online. I think we owe it to ourselves to be open to that conversation. And I've personally not been pushing subscriptions here because I think someone buying our merch and someone buying our clothes is our version of that. I look at time spent more than I look at uniques on site. I try to read a lot of the Instagram comments because sometimes I think that's more valuable feedback. But to me, this takeaway was like, we all need to be open to different ways of working. And I think other industries have done it. And I don't think the takeaway is you have to have a unique business model to be a successful magazine. I don't think so at all. I think more the takeaway is how else can we get young people inspired and excited about print?
We'll be right back.
Print is Dead is made possible with the support of Mag Culture. Read our online journal, listen to our podcast, and visit our shop to discover why we're convinced print is very much alive. All available at magculture.com.
It's so interesting because what you just described is like the reverse of a conversation that we worked together at Elle for many years, and that's where we fell in love. But we watched that pendulum go back and forth about how much to give away the print before it comes out, when it comes out. Like we've literally seen every degree of we don't give it away at all, or we wait a week after the print issue drops before we release anything.
Everybody's already had the conversation and we're late to it.
That is something that people have always toyed with. What perhaps works better about it in your beast or organism is that the issues are more rare. They come out twice a year. And that also perhaps you're producing so much other content on these other platforms that it's not like all of the energy goes into producing that print and therefore that's what you have to share with people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the New York Times headline was really effective in the same sense of like print just being part of the picture was the headline. And I thought that was real. We are doing so much other stuff. It's part of the picture. Our traffic is not reliant on one thing. Our uniques aren't really reliant on one thing. We have digital covers, we have print covers. Yeah, there's just more so that the pressure is off. And I think having an agency side that is responsible for most of the revenue does give the magazine the space to just be the best magazine.
It's interesting thinking about how all that you're saying is so new, and there's nothing new under the sun. Maggie and I started talking yesterday, like maybe this is in some way like a reframe of the same thing magazines have always been doing, like, but just way more honest. We worked at magazines for many years when it was like there's this idea of church and state, but of course your big advertisers just ended up on the cover. That has always been part of the stew of the magazine, the wider magazine organism. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you cannot buy a magazine cover full stop. That would be wild. Editorial integrity is something, especially from my journalism background, I take very seriously. But at the same time, there is a world in which Champion is a great example. They're a client of ours. We did these amazing raves and we were excited about them editorially. So my team wanted to write about it. And I was like, of course. So the goal is to make the branded content so amazing that we've covered organically. Sometimes it doesn't work. Brands are brands, but sometimes it does in the case of Champion. And I do give my CEO a lot of credit for letting me say no to things. I think that's also really helpful. He's very open to feedback. If there's a brand that comes in that is just not a good fit for our organism universe, we can say no. And I think the flexibility of having commerce, agency, and editorial really allows for that.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about part of your purpose being to sell the idea of journalism to the next generation, I'm curious how you define journalism, and with all of these different outlets that you have within the brand, do you feel like they're all journalism, or do you think of them different ways? Can e-commerce be journalism? Is that, like, when you say stretching the bounds of that word, how far do you think we could stretch it?
I think it's storytelling in the way of the shop. The Highsnobiety shop is so carefully curated. That to me is a form of storytelling. And then the way we cover it online. If the team is really excited about our Dries Van Noten print cover, that was completely editorial. We were so passionate about that story. We pursued it. The way it was curated on TikTok, for example, was a video of Dries receiving the issue before his last show. And then on Instagram, we posted the cover. And then we have a shop account, and we did like a curation of all the Dries in the shop. And to me, that is journalism. It was a story we wanted to tell, and we expressed it through different mediums. Is it the journalism I studied at Sarah Lawrence? No. My journalism teacher would roll her eyes. But what I was being taught at Sarah Lawrence, which was very valuable, but it was like, go to the city, talk to this visual artist, and write 10,000 words. And I would do it, and I loved it, and I dreamed of that. But there was this disconnect that I already saw happening before I graduated, that I was like, it is more than that. And I think to tell the 10,000 words, you have to understand how young people are consuming journalism and what they're thinking of journalism. And I've never thought like you should fight against your audience. You should find a way to be closer to them. And so to me, commerce, brand partnership, it all is a means to do that. But again, Dries Van Noten couldn't have paid for that cover. We pursued it. And I think that's the detail that keeps the magazine special and not branded.
So what was the disconnect that you were referring to there with the idea of going and just reporting a straight feature? Where did you see that as a disconnect?
Yeah, the journalism school at Sarah Lawrence is we're going to teach you how to write profiles, which I love writing. Personal essays and profiles are my favorite thing to write. If I had more time, that's what I would 100% want to do. And I loved both of those. We studied it very formally. My journalism teacher would bring in stacks and stacks of magazines. We'd literally just write profiles, critique them, go back and forth. And then as assignments, we would be sent to the city and we talk to different types of people, go over why we were asking questions. It was really immersive and exciting. And Sarah Lawrence is so close to the city, so that was really helpful. But I would just be writing. And then I would buy the magazines that I was dreaming of working at, and it just wouldn't exist. I would go and buy Cosmo, and it would be like a 3-paragraph story. And so I'd be like, where is this 10,000 words on a visual artist that doesn't have Instagram? I just already was like, where do those go? Maybe the Paris Review or like Harper's, but as a college student, can't dream of something that far away. I looked at 17, where I ended up getting my first job. And even once I got there, I remember writing news posts, and I was like, there's just no space for the type of journalism I studied. And that's really sparked my career. I was at 17 magazine. I was like one of the first people to be like, hey, Troye Sivan's on the cover. Can we post on Instagram? And they were like, sure, try it. This is like before social really blew up. I think now it's pretty normal. If you have a big cover story, you're going to post on Instagram. Pretty much all mastheads have some sort of social director and a team under them, which is really wild. I still can't believe that we moved there so quickly. And it's cool to me when we take that experience and we really bring journalism out of it. So an example I always give is Valentine's Day. We were all like in this brainstorm office hours, and we were talking about how all these publications were publishing these studies about young people not having sex. And my team was like heated about it. They were like, that's not true. We are having sex. We just literally missed a couple years from COVID. And my response was like, okay, so what is happening romantically? Let's do some studies. We had the insights team pull data from our readers, and we did a massive study. We had reporters on it, and it basically came back that it wasn't that they weren't having sex. It was that they were disillusioned from romantic partnerships, and they really were just used to connecting over their phones on creativity, and like collaboration to them and friendships were just more important. And so we photographed 3 creative duos, and we published this study that was like creative collaboration is the new sex. And to me, it's a perfect example of responding to the audience and saying something new, but also it is something that actually resonated, and it did pretty well.
While you're talking about the audience, I realized we didn't ask, do you view it as a men's publication? Who's the audience? What are the demographics? And what does it mean to be a high snob?
What I inherited was, I think it was 70-30 male, female. It's 50-50 now. And I feel like I keep getting asked questions about that. And I feel like my answer is, I think we've just expanded storytelling. In some ways, we've become more niche, I think, like in terms of really becoming a voice in men's fashion, 100%. We really doubled down on our coverage there. And I have social editors pretty much at all big men's shows. I really work with the team to have a POV and not just have like ambient content. But I think we've really been establishing ourselves in men's fashion. But the other swing is we have really great reporting about youth culture. And that's something I think that has really opened up the demographics and really helped us become more of a youth culture platform. An example is like we did a piece on how young people were statistically addicted to nicotine again. And that's like a perfect example where that has nothing to do with men's fashion, something that we were noticing and something that the team was talking about. And I was like, let's go report on this.
You've talked a lot about loving men's magazines and magazines in general, cutting them up and putting them on your wall like we did. Which ones did you grow up loving, and why men's magazines especially, even if you've brought your brand closer to 50-50?
Yeah, my favorites were by far GQ, Esquire. I just was so interested in them. I was so interested in the types of stories in there. I thought the journalism was really rich. But that being said, I loved ID, I loved Days, I loved Nylon. I always had a Vogue subscription. I still have the same one. I feel like I have never even renewed it. It's like on auto renew. I love what Chiyoma's doing at British Vogue now. But yeah, I was just always so fascinated in menswear. It was a natural inclination for me. I always wore men's clothing more than women's clothing. So I think I just like personally related to it. But I was such a big fan of magazines. I think also like in the time I was in high school, like everyone read magazines. Magazines were Bibles. I would look at a magazine before I would ask for advice from my older sister, who I talked to everything about. So to me, it was such like a resource and like a companion growing up. Yeah, and then I think I just saw myself more in men's fashion magazines.
So let's just breeze through your bio a little bit, which is late in the game for this interview. But you grew up in Silver Lake. We've already established that you went to Sarah Lawrence. So yeah. Can you just fill us in on the sort of broad strokes of where Willa Bennett came from?
Yeah, I was a dancer, but I wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to write books. I self-published 2 books of poetry on the side. That's always been my dream, always been my dream to write books and be in magazines. And I remember senior year going to my advisor, lead advisor, and saying to her, all right, I've taken all these classes. I want a job at magazines. I don't see this work there. And she was like, well, find the answer. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, find the answer. So I basically pitched to her, I'd go to a middle school for a month and hang out with 7th and 8th graders and just observe like how they are consuming media. And I did it. And basically the answer was like Instagram, House Party no longer exists, but House Party and Musical.ly, now TikTok, were the 3 things that they were really obsessed on. And so I wrote this paper on how you package content there, what's on there, and the magazines that had adapted. Through that project, I spoke to editors of both Teen Vogue and 17, and I feel like that kind of opened up my career. My first job was at 17, and then, I ended up freelance writing for Teen Vogue. Those 2 publications still near and dear to my heart. And then from there, I think I've just gone where I've seen an opportunity. I was at Bustle Digital Group at a time of tremendous growth. Then around the time that Will took over at GQ, I got moved over there and I really helped him re-envision social on this global scale. And really famously, he says, Instagram is the face of the magazine. And I feel like I really related to that and was excited about that chance. And then, yeah, Highsnob.
What inspired you to apply for this job at Highsnob to lead a brand that was a little bit more women's magazine? And you're a 28-year-old woman at the time. Take some chutzpah.
Honestly, they reached out to me and there was no job title in the description or anything. It was just a conversation. And I very confidently was like, this is what I would do if I was hired. And they liked that. It was a really like frank, honest conversation of this is what I think is missing from the landscape. This is what I see. This is my experience in digital and social. I was always that person at GQ that was like kicking and screaming at the print budgets. I'd be like, you're going to waste all that money on this story that 2 people are going to see. And they were like, yeah. And then I would be like up till midnight trying to figure out how to package it on social. And then I come here and I'm like, oh, now I have to do magazine. I loved it. I think like such a gift to have a magazine. And how cool that there is this resurgence in magazines. And there are stories that just are better in magazines. And I think being able to have that is something I've really learned to love.
We'll be right back.
Print is Dead is made possible by the support of the Society of Publication Designers. The SPD powers the future of visual storytelling, setting the standard for editorial excellence and shaping the future of visual culture. For more information, visit spd.org.
So we did wonder, actually, we were like, if there's all this other revenue streams, does that mean you get a better print budget? You can pay writers in the way that legacy publications are really struggling to do. Does that open you up to be more generous with creators for print?
Yeah, definitely. I think our managing editor, Jake, does a really great job of paying writers, being open about like how much we could do. Is this deadline work for you? Working with writers. She does a great job with that. But yes, we have a healthy print budget.
Maybe sitting in the only growth print sector that there is. You know, back to that big ASME question, but who else is saying that right now? I know that like Nylon has relaunched print, but they're not presumably working with the same revenue stream.
Yeah, Nylon is owned by Bustle Digital Group, so there is like a safety there. Yeah, I think it's specific, but I do also know that print budgets are still healthy. I buy all of them and I consume all of them, and photo shoots are still really fancy, in my opinion. Maybe it's not like a private jet and a horse for a one-page spread, but I don't know. Will said this recently on a panel, and I thought it was really interesting. He was like, how great is it that I'm leading a brand at a time where we can't afford a private jet and a horse? Because if we could afford it, I would do it for every shoot. And I was like, that's so real. I've never even known that life, so I don't even miss it. I'm more like excited by the constrictions and so motivated to figure out a way to make it work on a small budget. And I think also coming from social, I'm not used to like being able to go on a private jet.
You've said that you guys are social first, but can you talk to a couple of print dinosaurs, like what that really means to be social first, like how that works and then how you build the other tentacles around it? Here I go with my beast metaphor again.
Yeah. So some things like a Dries Van Noten cover, for example, is on Instagram is a cover reveal, but on TikTok, it's just a video of him receiving the cover. And then on Twitter, it's like the story tweeted out. So it's like taking that and then putting real thought into how it's on each platform. But then there's things like Valentine's Day, for example, when we were coming out with a study and we were all really excited about it and felt really seen by it. And on TikTok, 2 days before the research came out, we did these man on the street interviews about personal style and relationships and asking them similar questions. And so I think for me, it just means making high quality content per platform. And then from a resource perspective, we do have one person per platform, which is a bigger social team than I've ever led in my experience.
Okay, can you list off those platforms for us? What is the count?
Like taking notes.
Because we were like, wait, they have 6 Instagram feeds alone. So what are the relevant platforms where you have to be right now?
So Instagram, still really important. Most people are on it. Our audience really loyal. We have 5.5 million followers. Twitter, really voicey for us, really exciting. I think for us, it's just keeping up with fashion news. TikTok, obviously huge. We're about to hit 1 million. We just hit 900K after our Met Gala coverage. Those are like the 3 big ones, I would say. But of course, we have the shop account. We have some sub accounts. And then, yeah, Facebook still for traffic. I think that one's pretty much just like we keep populated for traffic. But I'm feeling like we could probably exit at any moment.
So when you say it's social first, do you think of that as like you start your coverage with the immediate bouncing everything that you're seeing onto social, and then what people react to, you build more coverage around, or maybe it's not that specific?
Because when you mentioned the Dries thing, it's like it's still bouncing off the print cover. I'm like, oh, I can identify with that.
It's still about the story. I think there's this misconception about people who come from social where like they are just like going to be content creators. We don't see it that way. We're more like our rollout is just as important as like our production of the magazine. I think that's more what I'm trying to get across. It's not that we can just never post on the website again. I actually was talking to someone recently and they were like, do we even need a website about their brand? And I was like, yes, everyone still needs a website. I don't believe that. I think that is not the answer.
They were thinking you could just do social.
They were like, I wonder if a brand could just be social. And I don't think that. I think our website is very important. But what I appreciate about this person is they were thinking of like how to tell stories in unique ways on social. And I was curious about that. I think there is a world in which we're like, this morning we wrote a review on the Gucci show and I wanted the headline to be on the social video when we put it out because I thought it really elevated the social content and that was something we did. But I think you need all of it.
I'm surprised that you guys are so into Twitter.
You're not calling X.
You're not calling it X.
X is interesting. I'm ready to ditch it, but we do have a loyal following there and we can be voicey there. And Corinne, who just graduated from FIT, I hired her from Twitter, actually, from X. And I think she's so brilliant at it and she's doing such a great job. I would check it out.
Definitely. So you made this huge leap in career from being a social media manager to being editor-in-chief of The Beast, the organism. So can you talk about what that meant for you personally? What does that look like for you? Yes, we would love for you to tell us how much money you're making, but you don't have to. But what does that look like on your side? Again, you are in the only growth print sector. What does that look like for you?
In terms of like perks and, you know, you're definitely in a more visible prestige job, but also like your life has to be materially different. Like I know you have an assistant.
Wow, Shay shout out. Yeah, Shay's amazing.
Hey, Shay.
Yes, I have an assistant. I did not have an assistant before. I still live in the same apartment. Honestly, the biggest change is that I got a gym membership.
Oh my God, no, that cannot be the biggest change.
That's a really nice gym.
It is unfortunately Equinox, but I did get an Equinox, what's called membership. I was really prescription. Yeah, I don't know. I really discovered working out in this role. I think it's such a boring answer, but I really want to keep writing. And I feel like I haven't had as much time as I wish just to do like personal writing before this job. I self-published some things. Like I really was excited about that. And I just truly don't have time. And I think that is the luxury thing that I am just like, it's worth it. I try to go most days, but it is expensive, honestly. It's not cheap.
I'm glad you did that for yourself.
I feel like if the Equinox publicist is listening, an editor-in-chief does not have to be, like, come on.
Has me winning.
Has me winning editor-in-chief here. Get on it.
I literally could not agree more.
And what do you do when you work out? Do you listen to podcasts? Are you on your phone? Like I'm sitting here, wow, like how much time do you spend on your phone a day?
What it honestly is, it's time without my phone. That is the gift that the gym has given me. I listen to podcasts pretty much like exclusively. Sometimes I'll listen to an album if I'm like, oh, should we cover this person? I'll like really study music, but I really try to not look at my phone because it's really the only time. Honestly, I was thinking about this today. It's the first thing I look at in the morning, the last thing I look at before I go to bed, which is horrible for you. And sometimes even when I'm like in the shower, my phone is like next to me. So it really is like the only time where I'm just like completely unreachable and really just thinking internally. And it feels similar to writing to me where it's like meditative and you're like, for a second, get outside yourself. I have a lot of my best ideas at the gym.
Maggie, should we start working out?
Shut up, Rachel.
I was saying this to someone last night. I wonder if it's going to stay. I don't know because I'm like not a gym person. That's the thing.
Yeah, but your generation is wellness oriented. I feel like, yes, you have to, right? You also have to eat weird grains and
Our generation is more like wine oriented.
I won't spend money on wine. It's weird. That's not my thing. My partner always makes fun of me. They're always like, why don't you buy more clothes? Like, you work in fashion. And I really have to love something to spend money on it. I'm very like, but gym is like the one thing I'm like, no problem.
Okay, while we have you here, this very esteemed and also captive audience, we wanted to ask you a question that is somewhat outside of your purview. Maybe not. We make this newsletter, The Spread, which is really a love letter to women's magazines. But even we are aware that the term women's magazines conjures some quote unquote psychic trauma for a lot of people. And we understand why. Like, we're on board with that. But we always sort of loved the sort of clubhouse element of a magazine that speaks to a particular
Community.
Thank you, Rachel. So you probably love this term. You're a disruptor who's always been drawn to men's media, right? But I wondered, we're living in this, or we're headed towards what seems like almost like a post-gender era. Do we need this clubhouse? What do you think about women's media, and what is a possible future for women's media in your mind?
That's interesting. I think you need to just reach young people, as your gender identity can continue to shift and change. And those labels are really just for marketing people. Like, story is good, story is good. And that's where like the journalism comes in, and like my journalism background comes in, because like at the end of the day, good stories are why we do this. So let's focus on that, and not, is it Marie Claire or is it Highsnobiety? We actually could tell the same stories if we wanted, and they would just reach different people. I also think brand IP is increasingly everything. I feel like I tell my news team this all the time, where I'm like, influence over reach. I'd rather have 20K great comments than a video that just like goes viral and like half of the comments are bots. To me, that does nothing. We were actually having this conversation in the postmortem at the Met Gala, where it was so cool that we had exclusive access, but I was really challenging the team, like, what makes this content ours? And to me, it was a story we wrote about one of the biggest social accounts that actually pays her rent in Brazil off of covering the Met Gala. And to me, that was a high snob story instead of just a video going viral. It's cool. What does it actually mean? And so I would say the same thing about this women's media, men's media. It's, what is your brand saying? That is, I think, what's most important.
Do you think this term women's magazines is too tainted at this point from, generations of diet stories? Can it be reclaimed?
That's interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't say like flat out no. When I am at Casa Magazines getting my magazines, I have never once thought, oh, I'm going to go pick out a women's magazine. Now I'm going to pick out a men's magazine. I go there and I'm like, I want to see what Chioma's doing at British Vogue. I want to pick up the new Nylon because I'm curious. I want to pick up GQ because so many people I love still work there. I want to pick up Gay Letters, really interesting to me. Girls I love. To me, it's just magazines I love and support. And I think it's almost an afterthought.
It's interesting hearing you say that you just feel like age and generation is like the great divide.
Someone recently said to me, and I had really never thought of it this way, and I don't have an answer, that when I was in middle school, the magazines I was so obsessed with, the men's magazines at the time, so GQ, Esquire, maybe Playboy, but I would actually take Playboy out, had longer reporting than women's magazines.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true, and why? I have been thinking about that because maybe that was part of the reason I was so obsessed with.
Yeah, same. I was the same as you, in high school, college, and right out of college. I was just this freak for GQ and Esquire. They never talked down to you. They talked to you like you're a badass.
The women's magazines could only give a certain amount of page space to features because those features did not make as much money. You couldn't sell ads against them. Rachel, how many features have you published that are opposite like a tampon ad? It was just sheer economics. But I think the end result is that it read as if women's magazines looked down on their reader and didn't think they wanted big reads. This was always a dance that we were doing.
You can find Willa Bennett at highsnobiety.com or on Instagram at Willa H. Bennett.
And don't miss out on the best reads of the week every week at The Spread on Substack.
If you'd like to connect more deeply with our guests, be sure to visit our website where we have complete transcripts of all our interviews, along with portfolios, archival photos, links, and other great information. Visit longliveprint.co/interviews for more. Print is Dead, Long Live Print is a member of the Hub and Spoke Audio Collective, a nonprofit association of audio storytellers dedicated to promoting and sustaining high-quality independent podcasting, including Soonish, a show from tech journalist Wade Roush that looks at how our choices about technology shape the future. In a recent episode titled "This is How You Win the Time War," Soonish looked at time as a form of technology. Wade spoke to one activist who argues that New England should buy itself more evening sunlight by moving into the Atlantic Standard Time Zone alongside the maritime provinces of Canada.
We should let time boss us around, you know what I mean? We should be in charge of it, not our television shows or anything else. It's never a bad idea to take a step back and think to yourself, is this how I want to live my life?
For more, visit soonishpodcast.org or find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Print is Dead, Long Live Print is made possible by support of listeners like you. If you'd like to contribute to keeping the podcast going, there are 2 easy ways. 1, become a sustaining patron by making a monthly donation, or 2, make a one-time donation in the amount that works best for you. Visit printisdead.co/support for more information.
Print is Dead, Long Live Print is a production of Modus Operandi Design. For more information, visit our website, printisdead.co, or if you're an optimist, longliveprint.co. Follow us on social media at printisdeadpod. Please give us a like and a review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. Thanks very much for listening.